There is a lot of tradition behind the president's inauguration, but things have not always been done the same way. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Connor Board. We've had our Verified team answering some of the biggest questions about the history of the inauguration. Here's our Jason Puckett.
President Joe Biden was sworn in Wednesday, officially making him the 46th president of the United States. Now, it's been tradition to see the president inaugurated on the east portico of the Capitol building. But have all presidential inaugurations been at the U.S. Capitol? The answer is no. According to the architect of the Capitol, the presidential oath of office has been taken 73 times in U.S. history, but only 56 were done at the Capitol, and 7 were actually done outside Washington, D.C. altogether, including George Washington, who was inaugurated in New York City before D.C. was officially the capital, and Lyndon B. Johnson, who was inaugurated on Air Force One following the assassination of President Kennedy. But what about timing? Has the inauguration always been on January 20th? No. The Library of Congress shows that George Washington was inaugurated in late April, and following Washington all the way till 1933, the official inauguration date was actually March 4th. Now, in 1933, the 20th Amendment was ratified, officially setting the presidential inauguration as January 20th. So President Biden's inauguration was unusual for the lack of people due to a pandemic. But what about past presidents? Have they all had official ceremonies with their inaugurations? Well, no. We actually found 10 past instances where the inauguration lacked a ceremony or audience. Now, these mostly happened when a VP took over following a president's death. For instance, in 1945, Harry Truman was sworn in the cabinet room inside the White House following FDR's death. And in 1901, Teddy Roosevelt was sworn in Buffalo, New York, following the death of President William McKinley. Folks, if you've got other inauguration claims or questions you want us to check out, send us an email. With the Verify, I'm Jason Puckett.